It was 3:27 a.m. in Toronto, Canada. The freezing mid-February wind was so strong, it was blowing the snow sideways across my rosy cheeks. I was almost too distracted by the icy wind cutting across my face that I almost didn't realize. There was a group of about 6 young men standing off right beside me outside of the nightclub. The difference between them and me was I could barely stand in this weather, but somehow they looked completely unfazed. As patrons to the club, these guys were wearing about half the amount of clothing that I was wearing as a bouncer. Decked out in Gucci t-shirts and fake diamond chains, these guys seemed to have been invincible. But what was it? How were they not even shivering standing outside in the freezing weather outside of this club? In the middle of Toronto's notoriously bone-shivering winter. It wasn't a superhuman ability, it wasn't some special drug they were on, and they certainly were not X-Men or Avengers. I'll tell you what it was. They had harnessed arguably the strongest force in a young man's life: their sex drive. As the club was closing down for the night, people started to empty out. Our friends outside the club were waiting for girls to come out. This would present them with a final opportunity to try and bring one of these girls home before everyone went home for the night. As these guys showed up to the club every single weekend trying to do the same thing, I began to recognize that each one of them invested all of their money in basically a single outfit. And that outfit would be the Gucci t-shirt and fake diamond chain that they would show off every weekend. Now, if they were to wear a jacket on top, they would obviously be hiding their Gucci t-shirt. Furthermore, if they showed a sign of weakness in these extreme elements, a girl might just see him as a bitch. So they all just stood there, stone-faced, and apparently unaffected by the weather. And they didn't just stand there for a few seconds. They stood there for maybe 30 minutes. It was, well, astounding. Regardless of whether or not they actually found a woman that night to bring home, let's examine this scenario together. Not even in exchange for sex, but for the prospect of sex, these guys were able to identify and organize towards their objective, i.e. getting girls, withstand opposition, i.e. the weather, do so in essentially modern stoicism, i.e. showing no pain to onlookers like myself, and maintain their resolve in order to achieve their goals, i.e. standing outside for 30 minutes. Imagine what these dudes could accomplish if, rather than trying to wrangle snooch at 3 a.m. outside a nightclub in the dead of the Toronto winter, they dedicated themselves to a larger goal, a larger purpose, something that required identifying your objective, organizing yourself around that objective, and embracing a stoic resolve in the face of opposition. They would be unstoppable, and they would inevitably become what they must become. Now, this is the message that I want to share with you, because it applies to you too. But okay, this sounds great, but what's getting in your way? Sexual addiction. Young men everywhere are addicted to porn and masturbation and sex. Let's take Timothy, for example. Whenever Timothy starts and tries to do something in his life, like building up his bank account, building the body of his dreams, or pursuing some sort of academic or scholastic goal, but also has the opportunity to be sexual, he's gonna take the sexual path. This inevitably derails Timothy's attention, focus, and motivation. If instead Timothy created some sort of rules that he could have around his own sexuality, he would make so many more leaps and bounds towards his actual goals. Okay, so now I can hear you asking, what sort of rules would make sense for me? Well, of course, that depends on your particular situation, but here are a few of my suggestions that cover a variety of sexual situations. The first thing I would say is put a rule around the times of day that you can and cannot use things like dating apps. The second thing I would say is start a challenge, maybe 30 days or so, where you're going to restrict being able to look at sexual material, especially pornography. And the last thing I would say is maybe try going out with your friends, but give them something really important of yours to hang on to. Lots of cash, a credit card, your ID, something like that. Then tell them that if you go home with a girl that night, you want them to cut that thing up immediately. Take some scissors, cut the credit card in half, rip the cash, whatever they gotta do. This will force you into reconsidering how you're going out for that night, which will change your entire outlook of what you're going to be doing for that evening. Now, I know that sounds intense, but when you give it a shot, you'll be able to see that you can have fun without constantly needing to pursue sex. Now, with these variety of rules, you could try a whole bunch of other things too, but I just want to say that, of course, there's no one size fits all for everybody. This is just a couple of my suggestions. But the main overarching point is, practicing some level of sexual discipline here and there allows your mind to not constantly be diverted to a place of sexuality when you're trying to make real progress in other goals. This then allows you to repurpose that energy that you would have used into the form that the guys that were outside the Toronto nightclub in the middle of winter showed us is possible for all men. You have inside of you that level of dedication, energy, and motivation to get things done. It's just that you're constantly purposing it towards something that's not going to serve your long-term goals. I am not saying that sexuality is bad. In fact, it's amazing. I am simply pointing out that where you can practice sexual discipline on occasion, you will enjoy that energy expressing itself elsewhere, and that is an incredibly powerful tool. I was actually so interested in how far I could push this kind of energy that I decided to push myself to the brink. I went 100 days without ejaculating just to see what would happen. If you want to see the crazy discoveries that I made during that experiment, I'll put that video up on your screen in about 10 seconds, so make sure you go and watch that. It's a really good one. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Spencer with Must Become. Always remember that your potential is your obligation, and so what you can become, you must become.